Commander Zextai clicked his mandibles in satisfaction as he reviewed the intelligence report on his holographic display. The blue-green light from the data streams cast eerie shadows across his insectoid features as he processed the information about their latest prize. A single human vessel, he muttered to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Vorthe K. Disabled and drifting in the Kepler 442 system. No escort ships. No distress beacon. Vortheke's compound eyes glittered with anticipation. The hegemony will reward us greatly for this capture, Commander. A live human specimen has been their most sought-after prize since the first contact wars began. The Zephyrian hegemony had been at war with the Terran Federation for 3 cycles now. What had started as a simple territorial dispute over mining rights in the Outer Rim had escalated into a full-scale conflict. The humans, despite their primitive technology and short lifespans, had proven to be surprisingly resilient opponents. Commander Zextai had earned his rank through careful planning and decisive action. His ship, the Vengeance of Zephyr, was one of the hegemony's most advanced vessels. Its bioorganic hull could regenerate from minor damage, and its weapons systems were powered by concentrated dark matter cores. Against the crude metal ships and chemical explosives of the humans, it should have been an easy victory. But the humans kept surprising them. "Sir," called out Navigation Officer Cathar A from her station, "we're approaching the target coordinates. The human vessel is exactly where our scouts reported." On the main view screen, a small ship appeared against the backdrop of distant stars. It was clearly human in design, angular, mechanical, and constructed from what appeared to be basic steel alloys. Scorch marks along its hull suggested it had been in recent combat. One of its engines was dark, and debris floated around it like a metal cloud. "Life signs?" Commander Zextai inquired. "Scanning now, sir," replied sensor technician Yothheim. After a moment, his antennae twitched with excitement. "Confirmed. 1 human life form aboard. Vital signs are weak but stable." "Perfect." The hegemony scientists had been demanding a live human for study. They wanted to understand what made these creatures so difficult to defeat despite their obvious physical limitations. Humans were smaller than most Zephyrians, had no natural weapons like claws or mandibles, and their technology was centuries behind the hegemony's bioengineering marvels. "Deploy the capture web," Commander Zextai ordered. "I want that ship secured and brought into our cargo bay intact. The human inside must remain unharmed." The Vengeance of Zephyr extended numerous organic tendrils from its hull. These appendages, grown from the ship's living tissue, wrapped around the human vessel like a spider securing prey in its web. Within minutes, the smaller ship was being drawn into the Zephyrian vessel's belly. As the human ship settled into the cargo bay, Commander Zextai made his way down from the bridge. He wanted to see their prize firsthand. The cargo bay was dimly lit by bioluminescent strips that ran along the walls, casting everything in a sickly green glow. The human vessel was even more primitive up close. Its hull was covered in rivets and welded seams. There were actual windows made of transparent aluminum rather than the bio-optical sensors that Zephyrian ships used. It was like looking at a museum piece from their own ancient history. "Atmospheric readings on the human ship?" Commander Zextai asked his team. "Standard oxygen-nitrogen mix," reported the biotechnician. "Pressure is within normal ranges for human habitation. The ship's life support systems are still functioning, though power levels are low." Commander Zextai nodded. "Prepare the extraction team. I want that human brought to the medical bay for initial examination. Use the paralysis field generators to keep it docile." A team of 6 Zephyrian soldiers approached the human ship's airlock. Their bio-armor glistened under the cargo bay lights, and their weapon pods were charged and ready. The paralysis field generators they carried would render any biological creature unconscious without causing permanent damage. The airlock opened with a mechanical hiss that sounded crude to Zephyrian ears, who were used to their ship's silent biomechanical functions. Inside, the human ship was even more basic than its exterior suggested. Bare metal corridors, primitive electrical conduits running along the walls, and harsh white lighting that hurt the soldiers' compound eyes. They found the human in what appeared to be the ship's command center. It was slumped over a control console, apparently unconscious. The creature was smaller than expected, barely reaching the chest height of an average Zephyrian. Its pale skin was unmarked by chitin or scales, and its hair was an unusual brown color that none of them had seen before. Deploying paralysis field, announced the team leader. The human didn't react as the energy field washed over it. Either it was already unconscious, or the field was working perfectly. Two soldiers carefully lifted the creature and began carrying it back toward the cargo bay. That's when things went wrong. The human's eyes snapped open. Instead of the glazed look of someone under paralysis field influence, they were sharp and alert. Before the soldiers could react, the human had somehow produced a small device from its clothing and activated it. A pulse of electromagnetic energy swept through the cargo bay. Every piece of Zephyrian biotechnology within 50 meters began to malfunction. The paralysis field generators sparked and died. The soldier's bioarmor started convulsing as its nervous system analogs were disrupted. Even the ship's organic systems began to twitch and spasm. The human dropped to its feet and moved with surprising speed toward its vessel. But, instead of trying to escape, it ran to what looked like a communications console and began rapidly inputting commands. "Stop it!" Commander Zextai shouted, but his soldiers were still struggling with their malfunctioning equipment. The human's fingers flew over the primitive mechanical controls. Whatever it was doing, it was working fast and with obvious expertise. A series of lights began blinking on the console, and a low humming sound filled the cargo bay. "Sir," came a panicked voice over the ship's internal communication system, "we're detecting a massive energy buildup from the human vessel." Commander Zextai realized with growing horror that they had been deceived. This wasn't a disabled ship with a helpless occupant. This was a trap, and they had walked directly into it. The human turned away from its console and looked directly at Commander Zextai. For the first time, he got a good look at the creature's face. Its features were alien but somehow expressive. And, in its eyes, he saw something that chilled him to his core. Intelligence. Purpose. And, most frightening of all, confidence. The human spoke in its native language, which the ship's translation system managed to interpret. "You should have left me alone." The energy buildup from the human ship reached critical levels. Warning alarms began sounding throughout the Vengeance of Zephyr as its biosystems detected the imminent threat. But, it was too late to eject the human vessel from the cargo bay. The explosion was contained but devastating. The human ship self-destructed in a carefully controlled manner that maximized damage to the surrounding area while somehow protecting its occupant. The cargo bay was filled with fragments of metal and circuitry, and several of the ship's bioorganic systems were severed or destroyed. When the smoke cleared, the human was gone. Emergency force fields had sealed the breaches in the cargo bay, but there was no sign of the creature anywhere. "Report!" Commander Zextai demanded. Multiple system failures throughout the ship, came the response from the bridge. Bioneural networks in sections 7 through 12 are completely offline. Our regeneration pods are working to repair the damage, but it will take time. What about the human? Unknown, sir. Sensors are malfunctioning in this section. It could be anywhere on the ship. Commander Zextai felt his mandibles clicking together nervously. They had captured what they thought was a helpless human, only to discover it was something far more dangerous. And now it was loose on their ship. "Seal all sections," he ordered. "Deploy hunter-killer drones to search for the intruder. I want it found and eliminated." But, even as he gave the orders, Commander Zextai couldn't shake the feeling that they were no longer the hunters. The human hadn't acted like prey being captured. It had acted like a predator that had been waiting for the right moment to strike. Over the ship's internal communication system, a new voice began to speak. It was the human, somehow having accessed their communication networks despite the primitive appearance of its technology. "This is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation Navy," the voice said calmly. "I am currently aboard your vessel as an uninvited guest. You have exactly 1 hour to surrender yourselves to Federation custody. If you refuse, I will begin systematically destroying your ship's critical systems." Commander Zextai's compound eyes widened in disbelief. "How is it accessing our communications?" "Unknown, sir," replied the communications officer. "Our bioneural networks should be impossible for primitive technology to interface with." The human's voice continued, "I should mention that my ship's destruction was not an accident or desperation. It was a signal beacon. Every Federation vessel within 50 light-years now knows exactly where you are and what you've done. That's impossible, Lieutenant Vorthake whispered. Our intelligence reports indicate humans don't have faster-than-light communication technology. The human seemed to hear him somehow, because she laughed. Your intelligence reports are wrong about a lot of things. For instance, you probably think you captured a disabled ship by accident. The truth is, I've been hunting your particular vessel for 2 weeks. You have a habit of targeting isolated human ships, don't you, Commander Zextai? The use of his name sent a chill through the Zephyrian commander. How could the human know who he was? My ship wasn't disabled, the voice continued conversationally. It was bait. And, you took it exactly as I predicted you would. On the bridge displays, system failures began cascading throughout the ship. The human was making good on her threat to destroy critical systems. But, she was doing it surgically, targeting specific bioneural nodes that would cause maximum disruption while keeping the life support systems operational. Sir, the engineering officer reported, she's somehow accessing our bioneural networks directly. It's like she knows exactly how our ships are designed. That's because I do know, the human's voice said through the speakers. We've been studying your technology for 3 years now. Every ship you've lost, every piece of wreckage you've left behind, every battle you've fought, we've learned from it all. Did you really think we were just throwing crude metal ships against your biotechnology out of ignorance? Commander Zextai was beginning to understand the terrible truth. The humans hadn't been fighting desperately with primitive weapons because that's all they had. They had been gathering intelligence, learning their enemies' capabilities and weaknesses, preparing for a larger conflict. The 43 human ships you've destroyed in the past 6 months, the voice continued, every single one of them transmitted detailed sensor data about your weapons, your tactics, your ship designs back to Federation Command before they were lost. You've been teaching us how to fight you. The ship shuddered as another critical system failed. Emergency lighting activated throughout the bridge, casting everything in a red glow that made the situation feel even more ominous. Weapons systems are offline, reported the tactical officer. She's targeted the dark matter containment chambers. If those fail completely, we'll lose main power. Life support is still functioning, added another officer, but she's rerouted control to manual systems throughout the ship. Commander Zextai realized they were completely at the human's mercy. In less than an hour, a single small creature had infiltrated and disabled one of the hegemony's most advanced vessels. What do you want? He finally asked aloud, knowing the human could hear him. I want you to understand something, came the reply. You made a mistake when you started targeting human civilians. We tried diplomatic solutions. We tried negotiating territorial boundaries. We tried offering technological exchanges. You responded by destroying our colonies and capturing our people for experimentation. The ship's internal sensors finally managed to locate the human. She was in the ship's bioneural core, the most heavily protected area of the vessel. Somehow, she had made her way through multiple security barriers and was directly interfacing with the ship's central nervous system. So we decided to teach you a lesson, the human continued. One that your entire species will understand. What lesson? Commander Zextai demanded. That when you hurt one human, you hurt all of humanity. And, when you hurt all of humanity, we stop being nice. On the long-range sensors, new contacts began appearing. Ships were dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the star system. At first, it was just a few contacts. Then, dozens. Then, hundreds. Lieutenant Vorthake stared at the sensor display in growing horror. Sir, we're detecting massive fleet formations jumping into the system. Human ships, but not like anything in our intelligence databases. The human's voice spoke again, but this time there was something different in her tone. Something that sounded almost like satisfaction. Commander Zextai, allow me to introduce you to the Terran Federation's 5th Fleet. 147 ships, including 12 Dreadnought-class vessels that were specifically designed to counter biotechnology like yours. Commander Zextai watched as the human fleet began moving toward their position in perfect formation. These weren't the crude metal ships his people had been fighting. These vessels were sleek, advanced, and moving with the precision of a military force that knew exactly what it was doing. How? He whispered. Did you really think we would fight a war without learning from it? The human asked. Every battle, every loss, every tactical mistake, we studied it all. And, while you were celebrating your easy victories against our primitive ships, our best engineers were designing weapons specifically meant to kill yours. The approaching fleet was massive. Commander Zextai had never seen so many human ships in one place. According to intelligence reports, the humans barely had a dozen vessels capable of interstellar warfare. But, the sensors were showing nearly 150 ships, many of them larger than anything the hegemony had encountered before. "This is Admiral Rebecca Martinez of the Fifth Fleet," came a new voice over the communications system. "Zephyrian vessel, you are to power down all weapon systems and prepare to be boarded. Any attempt to harm Lieutenant Commander Chen will result in the immediate destruction of your ship." Commander Zextai looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all looking at him, waiting for orders. But what orders could he give? They were outnumbered, outgunned, and had a saboteur loose in their ship's most critical systems. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "we're detecting energy buildups from multiple ships in the human fleet. They're targeting us with weapons we don't recognize." "This is your final warning," Admiral Martinez's voice said calmly. "Surrender now, or face the consequences." Commander Zextai had spent his entire career believing in the superiority of Zephyrian biotechnology and tactics. His species had conquered dozens of worlds, defeated countless enemies, and built an empire that spanned multiple star systems. The humans were supposed to be just another primitive species to be absorbed into the hegemony. But, as he looked at the massive fleet arrayed against his single ship, he began to understand that everything his people believed about the humans was wrong. "All stations," he said quietly, "power down weapons and prepare for surrender." Lieutenant Vorth AK stared at him in shock. "Sir, we cannot surrender to primitives." "They're not primitives," Commander Zextai replied, his voice filled with a resignation he had never felt before. "We never were fighting primitives. We were fighting an enemy that was pretending to be primitive while they learned everything they needed to destroy us." The human's voice, Lieutenant Commander Chen, spoke one more time, "Surrender accepted. Admiral Martinez, they're all yours." Admiral Rebecca Martinez stood on the bridge of the TFS Indomitable, watching his boarding pods launch toward the captured Zephyrian vessel. Each pod contained a full squad of Federation Marines equipped with the latest bio-warfare countermeasures. They had learned the hard way that Zephyrian ships were essentially living creatures, and fighting aboard one required specialized equipment. "Boarding teams away," reported Commander Jackson from the tactical station. "Lieutenant Commander Chen has secured the bio-neural core and is maintaining control of their primary systems." Admiral Martinez nodded grimly. Sarah Chen was one of their best intelligence officers, specially trained for deep infiltration missions. For the past 6 months, she had been posing as various stranded civilian personnel to gather intelligence on Zephyrian tactics. Today's operation was the culmination of all that dangerous work. "Any word from Fleet Command on the diplomatic situation?" Martinez asked her communications officer. "Latest reports indicate the Zephyrian hegemony has been demanding the return of their kidnapped vessel through neutral channels," came the reply. "They're claiming we attacked them unprovoked." Martinez almost laughed. The hegemony had been systematically targeting human civilian vessels for months, capturing citizens for biological experimentation and destroying colonies that refused to submit to their authority. Now they wanted to play victim when humanity finally responded with force. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Begin Phase 2 of the operation." Across the star system, the ships of the Fifth Fleet began moving toward their assigned targets. This wasn't just a rescue mission for Lieutenant Commander Chen. It was the opening move in humanity's first major offensive action against the Zephyrian hegemony. On the main view screen, Admiral Martinez could see the vengeance of Zephyr being surrounded by Federation vessels. The Zephyrian ship was massive, nearly 3 kilometers long and covered in the bioorganic armor that made their technology so difficult to fight. But it was also alone and now completely helpless. "Admiral," called out the sensor operator, "we're detecting additional Zephyrian vessels jumping into the system. Long-range sensors show at least 12 ships approaching from the Proxima Centauri direction." "Right on schedule," Martinez murmured. Intelligence had predicted that the hegemony would send reinforcements once they realized one of their ships was in trouble. "Signal Battle Group Charlie to move to intercept. It's time to show them what our new ships can do." The approaching Zephyrian vessels were part of their 7th Attack Squadron, according to intelligence reports. These were experienced crews who had been responsible for the destruction of the human colony on Kepler 438b. Admiral Martinez had been looking forward to this particular encounter. "All ships, this is Admiral Martinez," she broadcast to the fleet. "Today we begin to even the score for every human life lost to Zephyrian aggression. Remember your training, trust your equipment, and show these creatures what happens when they underestimate humanity." The Federation ships began spreading into attack formation. Unlike the crude metal vessels the Zephyrians had grown used to fighting, these new ships incorporated lessons learned from 3 years of warfare. Their hulls were lined with bioresistant alloys that could withstand the organic acids Zephyrian weapons used. Their weapons systems had been specifically designed to disrupt bioneural networks. Most importantly, their crews had been trained by veterans who had survived Zephyrian attacks. Every tactical maneuver, every weapon deployment, every defensive strategy had been tested against actual biotechnology in real combat situations. "Enemy vessels are in weapons range," reported the tactical officer. "They're deploying hunter-killer drones and preparing to fire their bioplasma cannons. All ships, engage at will," Admiral Martinez ordered. The Battle of Kepler 442 began with a coordinated salvo from 40 Federation vessels. The new electromagnetic pulse warheads detonated around the Zephyrian ships, sending cascades of disruptive energy through their bioneural networks. For creatures used to fighting enemies with chemical explosives and kinetic weapons, the effect was devastating. 3 Zephyrian vessels lost power immediately as their organic computer systems crashed. 2 more began spinning out of control as their navigation systems malfunctioned. The remainder tried to return fire, but their targeting systems were compromised by the electromagnetic interference. "Direct hits on multiple targets," the tactical officer reported with satisfaction. "Their bioneural networks are experiencing cascade failures across their entire squadron." Admiral Martinez watched as the Federation ships pressed their attack. The new plasma lance weapons cut through Zephyrian bioarmor like surgical instruments, targeting the vessel's central nervous systems with precision strikes. Within minutes, the entire enemy squadron was disabled or destroyed. "Minimal damage to our forces," came the damage report. 3 ships report minor hull scoring from bioplasma hits, but all vessels remain fully operational. It was a complete victory. The Zephyrian squadron that had terrorized human colonies for months had been eliminated in less than 10 minutes of combat. But Admiral Martinez knew this was just the beginning. "Signal Fleet Command," she ordered. "Inform them that Phase 2 is complete and we're ready to proceed to the next phase of operations." Meanwhile, aboard the captured Vengeance of Zephyr, Lieutenant Commander Chin was extracting valuable intelligence from the ship's bioneural networks. The Zephyrian crew had been transferred to Federation custody, but their vessel's organic computer systems contained detailed records of hegemony military operations. "Admiral," Chen's voice came through the communications system, "you need to see what I've found in their databases." The intelligence data was transmitted to the Indomitable S Command Center, where Admiral Martinez reviewed it with growing anger. The files contained detailed records of human prisoners taken during raids on civilian vessels. Men, women, and children who had been captured and transported to hegemony research facilities for biological experimentation. But more disturbing were the strategic documents that outlined the hegemony's long-term plans for humanity. This wasn't just a territorial dispute over mining rights. The Zephyrians intended to completely eliminate human civilization and use Earth as a breeding ground for their own species. "Get me a secure channel to Fleet Command," Admiral Martinez said quietly. Within minutes, she was speaking directly with Admiral Thompson, the head of Federation Naval Operations. "Rebecca, what's your status?" Thompson's voice crackled through the quantum communication link. "The immediate mission is a success, sir. We've neutralized the Zephyrian squadron and rescued Lieutenant Commander Chin. But we've discovered something that changes everything." Martinez transmitted the captured intelligence files. There was a long pause as Admiral Thompson reviewed the data. "Jesus Christ," Thompson finally said. "This is genocide they're planning." "Yes, sir. The documents indicate they've been systematically testing human biology to develop targeted bioweapons. They intend to deploy these weapons against Earth itself within the next 6 months." Another pause. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" Martinez looked out at her fleet. These ships represented the most advanced military technology humanity had ever created. They had been built in secret over the past 2 years, using captured Zephyrian technology and hard-won battle experience. They were humanity's answer to bioorganic warfare. I recommend we don't give them the chance, sir. The Fifth Fleet is ready for full offensive operations. We have the element of surprise and technological parity. If we're going to act, it should be now. The diplomatic consequences, with respect, sir, there won't be any humans left to worry about diplomatic consequences if we don't stop them now. Admiral Thompson was quiet for nearly a minute. Martinez could imagine the debate raging in Fleet Command. Humanity had always tried to solve conflicts through negotiation and compromise. But, sometimes, when faced with an enemy determined to commit genocide, the only answer was overwhelming force. You have authorization for full offensive operations, Thompson finally said. God help us all. Understood, sir. We'll try to minimize civilian casualties, but our primary objective is to eliminate the hegemony's ability to threaten Earth. The communication ended, and Admiral Martinez turned to address her bridge crew. They had all heard the conversation and understood what it meant. They were about to launch the largest military operation in human history. All hands, this is Admiral Martinez, she announced over the ship's communication system. In approximately 30 minutes, we will begin offensive operations against Zephyrian military targets throughout this sector. Our objective is to prevent a planned genocide against the human species. She paused, letting that information sink in. Every person aboard these ships was a volunteer. They had all lost friends or family members to Zephyrian aggression. Now they finally had a chance to fight back. The enemy considers us primitive and weak. They believe our technology is inferior and our tactics are predictable. Today, we're going to show them how wrong they are. Across the fleet, ships began powering up their weapon systems and preparing for jump to faster-than-light travel. Their destination was the Zephyrian military base at Wolf 359, where intelligence indicated a large portion of their fleet was stationed. Fleet status report, Martinez requested. All ships report ready for jump, came the reply. Weapons systems are fully charged, and all personnel are at battle stations. Admiral Martinez looked once more at the disabled Zephyrian vessel. It had taken humanity 3 years of losses and suffering to reach this point. They had endured attacks on their colonies, the capture of their citizens, and the constant threat of extinction. But they had also learned. Every defeat had taught them something about their enemy. Every captured piece of technology had revealed new possibilities. Every lost ship had transmitted valuable intelligence before its destruction. The Zephyrians had thought they were fighting a primitive species, but they had actually been training humanity to become a more dangerous opponent. Begin jump sequence, Admiral Martinez ordered. All ships, follow my lead. The Fifth Fleet disappeared from the Kepler 442 system in a coordinated faster-than-light jump. Behind them, they left the wreckage of a Zephyrian squadron and proof that humanity was no longer willing to be victims. When they emerged from jump space near Wolf 359, they found exactly what intelligence had promised, a massive Zephyrian naval base protected by orbital defense platforms and patrolled by dozens of warships. It was the largest concentration of enemy forces outside their home system. Enemy vessels are responding to our arrival, reported the sensor operator. We're detecting 43 Zephyrian ships moving to intercept. Admiral Martinez smiled grimly. The Zephyrians were about to learn that the small, primitive human fleet they remembered no longer existed. In its place was a force specifically designed to destroy biotechnology. All ships, engage targets of opportunity, she ordered. Show them what humans can do when we stop playing nice. The Battle of Wolf 359 would become the turning point of the war. But, for now, Admiral Martinez focused on the immediate task of proving that humanity was ready to fight for its survival against any enemy, no matter how advanced they claimed to be. The Wolf 359 naval base had been the pride of the Zephyrian hegemony for over 2 decades. Built into the asteroid field surrounding the red dwarf star, it served as both a shipyard and a fortress protecting their expansion into human space. Its bioorganic defense platforms could regenerate from damage, and its fleet of warships had never been defeated in battle. Base Commander Thekvar was reviewing daily reports when the alarms began sounding. Emergency bioluminescent strips flashed throughout the command center as his staff rushed to their stations. Report, he demanded, his mandibles clicking with irritation. Long-range sensors detect multiple unknown contacts dropping out of hyperspace, replied the sensor technician. Initial count shows, this can't be right. What is it? Sir, we're reading nearly 150 vessels. They're not matching any known human ship configurations. Commander Thekvar felt his blood chill. The largest human fleet ever detected had contained perhaps 20 vessels, and those were the crude metal ships that his forces had been destroying with ease for months. "Put it on the main display," he ordered. The holographic projector in the center of the command chamber activated, showing the space around Wolf 359. What Thekvar saw defied everything he thought he knew about human military capabilities. The approaching fleet was massive and organized in perfect formation. These weren't the desperate, makeshift vessels he expected from a primitive species. These ships moved with precision and discipline, their hull design sleek and clearly purpose-built for warfare. "Sir," called out the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel." "Put it through." A human face appeared on the communication display. It was a female with short gray hair and eyes that seemed to bore into Thekvar's soul. She wore a military uniform he didn't recognize, with insignia that suggested high rank. "This is Admiral Rebecca Martinez of the Terran Federation 5th Fleet," the human said calmly. "Base Commander Thekvar, you are surrounded and outgunned. I'm offering you one opportunity to surrender." Thekvar's compound eyes widened in surprise. How did this human know his name and rank? "Surrender," he managed to say. "You dare demand surrender from the Zephyrian hegemony?" "I dare demand many things," Admiral Martinez replied. "Including an explanation for the human prisoners being held at your facility." The mention of prisoners caught Thekvar off guard. The research facility attached to the base did indeed hold several dozen human subjects, but that information was supposed to be classified. "I don't know what you're talking about," he lied. Admiral Martinez's expression didn't change. "Base Commander, we have detailed intelligence about your operation here. We know about the biological experiments being conducted on human prisoners. We know about the bioweapon development program. And we know about your plans to deploy those weapons against Earth." Impossible. The security around those programs was absolute. No human should have access to that information. "You have 30 seconds to begin evacuating non-combatant personnel," Admiral Martinez continued. "After that, we begin our attack." Thekvar cut the communication and turned to his staff. "Battle stations. All ships prepare for combat. Deploy the hunter-killer swarms and activate the defense platforms." The Wolf 359 base had been designed to withstand assault by any known enemy fleet. Its bioorganic defense platforms were living creatures the size of small moons, capable of regenerating damage and launching swarms of guided projectiles. The 43 warships stationed there included some of the hegemony's most advanced vessels. "All defensive systems are online," reported the tactical coordinator. "Our fleet is moving to engage the human forces." On the display, the two fleets approached each other across the void of space. The Zephyrian ships moved in their traditional hunting formation, designed to surround and overwhelm enemies with superior numbers and firepower. But something was wrong. The human ships weren't responding to Zephyrian tactics the way they should. Instead of scattering or trying to flee, they maintained perfect formation and continued their steady advance. "Enemy vessels are powering weapons," called out the sensor technician. "Energy signatures are unlike anything in our database." "Fire at will," Thekvar ordered. "Destroy them." The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with bioplasma cannons and organic missile swarms. The space between the two forces filled with deadly energy and projectiles. Thekvar watched confidently as the barrage approached the human ships. Then, the impossible happened. The human vessels deployed what appeared to be energy shields, but not like any defensive technology the Zephyrians had encountered. These shields didn't just absorb or deflect incoming fire, they seemed to actively disrupt it. Bioplasma bolts lost cohesion and dissipated. Organic missiles began malfunctioning and destroying themselves. "Our weapons are having no effect," reported the tactical coordinator in disbelief. Before Thekvar could respond, the human fleet returned fire. The energy beams that lanced out from their ships were unlike anything he had seen before. When they struck Zephyrian vessels, the effects were devastating. The bioorganic hulls of Zephyrian ships began convulsing and dying. Their living computer systems crashed as electromagnetic pulses disrupted bioneural networks. Within minutes, 3 of his most powerful warships were drifting helplessly, their crews trapped aboard dying vessels. "How are they doing this?" Thekvar demanded. "Unknown, sir," came the terrified reply. "It's as if their weapons were specifically designed to counter our biotechnology." That was exactly what had happened, though Thekvar didn't know it. For 3 years, human scientists had been studying captured Zephyrian technology. They had learned how bioneural networks functioned, how organic hulls regenerated, how living weapons systems operated. And, then, they had designed countermeasures for all of it. The electromagnetic pulse weapons disrupted the electrical patterns that bioneural networks used to communicate. The energy shields generated frequencies that interfered with bioorganic matter on a cellular level. The plasma lance weapons delivered targeted radiation that caused catastrophic cellular damage to living ship hulls. Every aspect of the new Federation fleet had been designed with one purpose in mind: to kill Zephyrian biotechnology. "Sir," the communications officer called out urgently, "we're receiving reports from across the fleet. Ships are losing power and life support. The defense platforms are going offline." Thekvar watched in horror as his supposedly impregnable fortress was systematically destroyed. The massive bioorganic defense platforms that had taken decades to grow were dying in minutes. His fleet of warships was being picked apart with surgical precision. "Retreat," he finally ordered. All ships jumped to hyperspace immediately. But escape was no longer an option. The human fleet had positioned itself to cut off all retreat routes. As Zephyrian ships tried to break away and jump to faster-than-light travel, they found themselves targeted by coordinated fire from multiple Federation vessels. The humans had learned more than just how to counter Zephyrian weapons. They had also studied Zephyrian tactics, learned their standard formations, and anticipated their likely responses to different situations. Every move Thekvar's forces made was met by a perfectly timed countermove from the Federation fleet. "Sir, the humans are jamming our hyperspace navigation systems," reported the ship's bioengineer. "We can't jump out." "Then, we fight to the end," Thekvar declared, though he could hear the defeat in his own voice. The battle continued for another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. Ship after ship in the Zephyrian fleet was disabled or destroyed. The great bioorganic defense platforms died one by one, their massive forms going dark against the backdrop of space. Admiral Martinez watched the destruction from the bridge of the Indomitable. There was no satisfaction in the victory, only grim necessity. Every Zephyrian ship destroyed was one less threat to human civilization. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a surrender transmission from the base commander." "Put him through." Thekvar's image appeared on the screen again, but this time he looked defeated. His compound eyes were dim, and his mandibles hung slack with exhaustion. "Admiral Martinez," he said wearily, "I surrender my forces to Federation custody." "Understood, Base Commander. Prepare to receive boarding parties. Any attempt to harm the human prisoners at your facility will result in the complete destruction of the base." Thekvar nodded slowly. "The prisoners will not be harmed." As Federation Marines began boarding the Zephyrian vessels and the base itself, Admiral Martinez turned her attention to the next phase of the operation. The victory at Wolf 359 was significant, but it was only the beginning. "Signal Fleet Command," she ordered. "Inform them that Wolf 359 is secured and we're ready to proceed to Phase 4. The plan that had been developed by Federation strategists was ambitious in scope. Rather than simply defending human space, they intended to strike at the heart of the Zephyrian hegemony itself. The capture of Wolf 359 provided them with a forward base of operations and access to Zephyrian navigation charts. "Ma'am," called out the intelligence officer, "Lieutenant Commander Chen has finished downloading the base's computer files. You're going to want to see this." The data that Chen had extracted painted a disturbing picture of the hegemony's true intentions. The bioweapon program was far more advanced than intelligence had suggested. They were within weeks of completing a pathogen specifically designed to target human DNA. But, more important were the strategic documents that revealed the location of the hegemony's primary research facility. It was located in the Arcturus system, heavily defended and supposedly impregnable. "How long until the fleet is ready for the next jump?" Admiral Martinez asked. 6 hours, ma'am. The ships need time to recharge their hyperspace drives and reload their weapons. Martinez nodded. 6 hours to prepare for what would likely be the most important battle in human history. If they could destroy the bioweapon research facility at Arcturus, they could prevent the extinction of the human species. Send a message to all ship captains, she ordered. I want them to understand exactly what we're up against. Within an hour, the senior officers of the Fifth Fleet had assembled via holographic conference. Captain Rodriguez of the Defiance, Captain Singh of the Retribution, Captain O'Brien of the Vengeance, some of the best military minds humanity had to offer. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Martinez began, the intelligence we've gathered from Wolf 359 confirms our worst fears. The Zephyrians are planning to deploy bioweapons against Earth within the next month. She displayed the captured data for all to see. The images of the weapons' effects were horrifying, simulations showing entire human populations dying within days of exposure. Our objective is to destroy the research facility at Arcturus and prevent the completion of these weapons. But I want you all to understand the risks. Arcturus is the most heavily defended system in Zephyrian space. We'll be facing their best ships and their most experienced crews. Captain Rodriguez spoke first. Admiral, what's the estimated casualty rate for this operation? High, Martinez admitted. Possibly very high. But the alternative is the extinction of every human being in the galaxy. Captain Singh leaned forward in her chair. What intelligence do we have about the defenses at Arcturus? 237 warships, including their newest Dreadnought-class vessels. 17 orbital defense platforms. And a planetary shield generator that's powered by the planet's core. The numbers were sobering. Even with their technological advantages, the Federation fleet would be outnumbered nearly 2-1. However, Martinez continued, we do have some advantages. The Zephyrians don't know about our new weapons technology. They'll be expecting us to fight with the same crude tactics they've seen before. And we have the element of surprise. Captain O'Brien raised his hand. Admiral, what about the human prisoners at Arcturus? The intelligence data had indicated that hundreds of human captives were being held at the research facility, subjects for the bioweapon experiments. Rescue of prisoners is a secondary objective, Martinez said firmly. Our primary mission is to prevent those weapons from being completed. If we fail in that objective, those prisoners and everyone else in human space will be dead within a month anyway. The conference continued for another hour as they refined their attack plan. It would be a coordinated assault involving multiple phases. First, the destruction of the orbital defenses, second, the penetration of the planetary shield, and, finally, the destruction of the research facility itself. Are there any questions? Admiral Martinez asked as the briefing concluded. Captain Rodriguez spoke for all of them. When do we leave? In 5 hours. Use that time to prepare your crews and check your equipment. This may be the last battle some of us ever fight, but it's the most important one in human history. As the holographic conference ended, Admiral Martinez remained alone on the bridge of the Indomitable. Outside the viewports, she could see the wreckage of the Wolf 359 base floating in space. Just a few hours ago, it had been the hegemony's most important military installation. Now it was a monument to the folly of underestimating humanity. Admiral, her executive officer approached quietly, the crew is asking about shore leave. Martinez almost laughed. Commander, in 5 hours we're jumping into the most heavily defended system in enemy space to prevent the extinction of our species. Shore leave is probably not in the cards. Yes, ma'am. But, the crew is requesting permission to record personal messages for their families. That was a sobering thought. Many of the people aboard these ships might not survive the coming battle. They had a right to say goodbye. Granted, Martinez said quietly. 1 hour for personal messages, then, back to battle preparation. As word spread throughout the fleet, Admiral Martinez composed her own message to her family back on Earth. She told her children how proud she was of them, reminded her husband of how much she loved him, and tried not to think about the possibility that they might never see each other again. But, that was the price of defending humanity against extinction. Someone had to be willing to pay it. In 4 hours, the Fifth Fleet would jump to Arcturus and face the largest enemy force in the galaxy. They would either save humanity from genocide or die trying. Admiral Martinez looked out at the stars and whispered a prayer that they would be strong enough for what was coming. The Arcturus system was the crown jewel of the Zephyrian hegemony. Orbiting a bright orange star, the planet Arcturus Prime housed the hegemony's most important research facilities and served as the sector capital. Its orbital defenses were legendary, and no enemy force had ever successfully penetrated the system. High Admiral Kethmore stood in the command center of the orbital defense station Eternal Dominion, reviewing reports from across hegemony space. The news was troubling. Wolf 359 had gone dark 6 hours ago, and there were unconfirmed reports of a large human fleet operating in the sector. High Admiral called out his intelligence coordinator. We're receiving an emergency transmission from the 4th Reconnaissance Squadron. Put it through. The image that appeared on the communication display was of Squadron Leader Vextal, one of the hegemony's most experienced officers. But, instead of his usual composed demeanor, Vextal looked shaken and frightened. High Admiral, my squadron has encountered the human fleet responsible for the Wolf 359 attack. The enemy force consists of approximately 150 vessels of unknown configuration. Their technology appears to be specifically designed to counter our biosystems. Explain, Kethmore demanded. Sir, their weapons are devastating to bioorganic matter. Our ship's hulls die on contact with their energy beams. Our neural networks crash when exposed to their electromagnetic pulses. It's as if they found a way to turn our greatest strength into our greatest weakness. High Admiral Kethmore felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. The hegemony's entire military doctrine was based on the superiority of biotechnology over crude mechanical systems. If the humans had found a way to counter that advantage. What is your current status? He asked. We are retreating to the Proxima Centauri system, Vextal replied. Half my squadron is destroyed or disabled. The human fleet is advancing toward your position at maximum speed. The communication ended, leaving Kethmore staring at a blank display. In his 2 decades of service, he had never heard of a Zephyrian squadron retreating from human forces. The implications were staggering. All stations, battle alert, he ordered. Contact the fleet commanders and order them to defensive positions. And get me a direct link to the research facility. The primary bioweapon laboratory on Arcturus Prime was the most heavily guarded facility in hegemony space. The weapon being developed there represented the final solution to the human problem, a pathogen that would eliminate every member of the species within weeks. Dr. Ythara, the facility's lead researcher, appeared on the communication display. Her usually calm demeanor was replaced by obvious stress. High Admiral, we've received word of the human fleet's approach. How long until completion of the weapon? 72 hours for the final synthesis, Dr. Ythara replied. But, High Admiral, some of our human test subjects have been displaying unexpected resistance to the earlier versions. We may need additional time for refinement. You don't have additional time, Kethmore said grimly. If the human fleet penetrates our defenses, the entire project could be compromised. I need that weapon ready for deployment as soon as possible. Understood, High Admiral. We'll accelerate the timeline. As the communication ended, alerts began sounding throughout the command center. Long-range sensors had detected the approach of the human fleet. Report. Kethmore demanded. 147 vessels dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, called out the sensor operator. They're moving in coordinated formation toward the planet. On the main tactical display, the approaching human fleet appeared as a cloud of red indicators. The Zephyrian defensive forces showed as green indicators 237 warships plus the orbital defense platforms. It should have been an easy victory for the hegemony forces. They outnumbered the humans and were fighting in their own heavily fortified system. But, after hearing Squadron Leader Vextal's report, High Admiral Kethmore wasn't feeling confident. Signal all fleet commanders, he ordered. Deploy in defensive formation around the orbital platforms. Do not engage the humans until they're within range of all our weapons. The Zephyrian fleet moved into position with practiced precision. These were experienced crews who had fought in dozens of battles across the galaxy. Their bioorganic ships were among the most advanced vessels ever created. But, as the human fleet approached, something became apparent that changed everything. High Admiral, the sensor operator called out with confusion in his voice, the human ships are not responding to our tactical scans. It's as if their hulls are specifically designed to interfere with bioneural sensor networks. What do you mean? Sir, we can detect their presence, but we can't get detailed information about their weapons, shields, or internal systems. Our targeting computers are having difficulty locking onto them. This was a problem that Zephyrian forces had never encountered before. Their bioneural sensor systems had always been able to analyze enemy vessels in detail, providing tactical advantages in combat. If the humans had found a way to blind those sensors. "Sir," called out the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it through." Admiral Martinez's face appeared on the display, just as calm and composed as she had been at Wolf 359. "Hi Admiral Kethmore," she said. "I'm Admiral Rebecca Martinez of the Terran Federation. You have human prisoners at your research facility who are being subjected to biological experimentation. You will release them immediately and surrender your bioweapon research." "Impossible," Kethmore replied. "The hegemony does not negotiate with primitives." Admiral Martinez's expression didn't change. "Hi Admiral, I think there's been a misunderstanding. You seem to believe you're in a position to dictate terms. Allow me to correct that impression." The human fleet suddenly accelerated, their ships moving faster than anything in the Zephyrian database. Within minutes, they had close to weapons range and deployed in an attack formation that seemed to anticipate exactly how the Zephyrian forces would respond. "All ships, open fire." High Admiral Kethmore ordered. The space around Arcturus Prime erupted in weapons fire. Bioplasma cannons sent streams of organic energy toward the human ships while swarms of guided projectiles filled the void between the two fleets. But, just as at Wolf 359, the human defenses proved devastatingly effective. Their energy shields disrupted bioorganic weapons on contact, causing them to lose cohesion and effectiveness. The guided projectiles began malfunctioning as their bioneural guidance systems were jammed by electromagnetic interference. "Minimal damage to enemy vessels," reported the tactical coordinator in disbelief. "Their defensive systems are completely negating our weapons." Then, the humans returned fire, and the true horror began. The Federation ships launched a coordinated barrage of electromagnetic pulse torpedoes and plasma lance weapons. When the EMP warheads detonated among the Zephyrian formation, every bioneural network within the blast radius crashed simultaneously. Ships lost power, life support, navigation, and communication all at once. Their bioorganic hulls began convulsing as the electrical patterns that maintained cellular cohesion were disrupted. Within minutes, dozens of Zephyrian vessels were drifting helplessly. The plasma lance weapons then began systematically destroying the disabled ships. The directed energy beams cut through bioorganic armor like surgical instruments, targeting specific weak points that suggested detailed knowledge of Zephyrian ship design. "Sir, we've lost 30% of our fleet in the first exchange," the tactical coordinator reported with terror in his voice. High Admiral Kethmore watched in horror as his forces were systematically destroyed. The humans weren't just winning, they were winning easily. Their weapons and tactics suggested years of careful study and preparation. "How is this possible?" he whispered. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the human ships broke formation and approached the command station directly. As it came closer, Kethmore could see that it was smaller than the others and appeared to be broadcasting on an emergency frequency. "High Admiral," the communications officer said, "the approaching vessel is transmitting on a diplomatic channel." "Put it through." The face that appeared belonged to a human female, but not Admiral Martinez. This was someone younger, with the insignia of a lower rank. "High Admiral Kethmore," she said, "I am Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, Terran Federation Intelligence. I think we need to talk." "I don't negotiate with spies," Kethmore replied. "You should," Chen said calmly. "Because I'm the person who's been feeding your tactical information to Federation Command for the past 6 months." The words hit Kethmore like a physical blow. "Impossible. Our security protocols are designed to detect primitive mechanical infiltration," Chen interrupted. "They're not designed to detect someone who understands bioneural networks better than the people who designed them." On the tactical display, more Zephyrian ships were falling to the human assault. The orbital defense platforms were beginning to show signs of system failure as electromagnetic pulses overwhelmed their bioneural cores. "For 3 years," Chen continued, "every battle you've won against our primitive ships has been a learning experience for us. Every piece of wreckage you've left behind has taught us something about your technology. Every tactical maneuver you've used has been analyzed and countered. You've been studying us," Kethmore realized with growing horror. "We've been hunting you," Chen corrected. "The difference is that you thought you were the predators in this relationship." The human fleet had now broken through the outer defensive perimeter and was approaching the orbital platforms directly. The massive bioorganic structures were trying to regenerate from the electromagnetic damage, but the humans weren't giving them time to recover. "Sir," the tactical coordinator called out urgently, "the humans are targeting the planetary shield generators. If the planetary shields fell, the research facility would be vulnerable to direct attack. The bioweapon that could save the hegemony from human expansion would be destroyed before it could be completed. All remaining ships, protect the shield generators at all costs," Kethmore ordered. But it was too late. The Federation ships had already identified the shield generators and were coordinating their attack with surgical precision. Plasma lance weapons struck the generators' bioneural control systems while electromagnetic pulses disrupted their power flow. One by one, the shield generators failed and went dark. The protective energy barrier that had protected Arcturus Prime for decades flickered and died. "Planetary shields are down," reported the sensor operator with defeat in his voice. Admiral Martinez's image appeared on the communication display again. "Hi Admiral, your orbital defenses are neutralized and your planetary shields have fallen. I'm prepared to accept your surrender." "Never," Kethmore replied, though he could hear the futility in his own voice. "Then, you leave me no choice," Martinez said sadly. "Dr. Yathara and her research facility are now legitimate military targets." The largest ships in the human fleet began moving into bombardment positions above the planet. Their weapons were trained on the bioweapon research facility that represented the hegemony's last hope for victory. "Wait," Kethmore said desperately. "What are your terms?" "Complete surrender of all hegemony forces in this system. Immediate release of all human prisoners. And full disclosure of your bioweapon research so we can develop countermeasures." It was total capitulation. Everything the hegemony had worked toward for decades would be lost. But the alternative was the destruction of their most important research facility and the deaths of thousands of Zephyrian civilians. Kethmore began, then stopped. On the tactical display, he could see the human ships preparing to fire on the planet. "I accept your terms." The admission of defeat felt like poison in his throat, but there was no alternative. The humans had proven that they were no longer the primitive species the hegemony had believed them to be. "Surrender acknowledged," Admiral Martinez replied. "Prepare to receive boarding parties and begin evacuating all personnel from the research facility." As Federation Marines began boarding Zephyrian ships throughout the system, High Admiral Kethmore sat in his command chair and contemplated the magnitude of what had just happened. The hegemony had underestimated humanity from the beginning. They had assumed that technological superiority would be enough to ensure victory. But the humans had proven to be far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. They had learned. They had adapted. And they had turned the hegemony's greatest strength against them. For the first time in his life, High Admiral Kethmore wondered if the Zephyrian hegemony had finally met an enemy they couldn't defeat. 6 months after the Battle of Arcturus, Admiral Rebecca Martinez stood in the conference room aboard the TFS Indomitable, looking out at the most unlikely gathering in galactic history. Around the table sat representatives from a dozen different species, all former enemies or subjects of the Zephyrian hegemony. The Valkyrie delegation consisted of 3 tall, crystalline beings whose homeworld had been conquered by the Zephyrians 50 years ago. The Vasian ambassador was a small, furry creature whose people had been used as test subjects for bioweapon development. And, sitting at the far end of the table, looking uncomfortable and defeated, was High Admiral Kethmore himself. "Let me make sure I understand the situation correctly," Admiral Martinez began, addressing the assembled delegates. "The Zephyrian hegemony has formally surrendered and agreed to dismantle all bioweapon research programs. In exchange, humanity has agreed to provide protection and technological assistance to all former hegemony territories." The Valkyrie representative, whose name was roughly translatable as Crystalline Song of Wind, spoke with a voice like chiming bells. "Admiral Martinez, our people are grateful for human intervention. But many of us are confused. Your species is younger and less technologically advanced than most others at this table. How did you achieve what we could not?" It was a question that Admiral Martinez had been asked many times in the past months. The answer was both simple and complex. "We learned," she said simply. "When the Zephyrians first attacked our colonies, we made a decision. Instead of just fighting back, we studied them. Every battle, every defeat, every small victory taught us something about our enemy. High Admiral Kethmore shifted uncomfortably in his seat. As part of the surrender agreement, he had been required to provide detailed briefings about Zephyrian military doctrine and technology. The process had been humbling for someone who had once considered humans to be primitive savages. "But, how did you counter our biotechnology so effectively?" he asked. "Our scientists still don't understand how your electromagnetic weapons work." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, who was now serving as the Federation's chief intelligence liaison, answered from her position near the door. "We studied captured bioneural networks for 3 years. We learned how they function, how they communicate, how they can be disrupted. Then, we designed weapons specifically to exploit those weaknesses." "But, that's impossible," protested the Vizian ambassador, whose translator rendered his squeaking voice into standard galactic. "Bioneural networks are infinitely complex. It should take decades to understand them." Chen smiled slightly. "It would take decades if you were trying to understand them completely. We didn't need to understand them completely. We just needed to understand how to break them." Admiral Martinez gestured to the holographic display in the center of the table, which showed a map of the local galactic sector. "The point is, we're here to discuss the future, not relitigate the past. The hegemony's surrender has left a power vacuum in this sector. Someone needs to maintain order and protect the various species from chaos." The Valkyrie representative chimed thoughtfully. "You propose that humanity should take this role?" "We propose that all of us should take this role," Martinez corrected. "The Terran Federation is establishing a mutual defense agreement with any species that wants to participate. We share technology, we share intelligence, and we protect each other from threats." "And what does humanity gain from this arrangement?" asked the Carillion delegate, a six-armed being whose species had been enslaved by the Zephyrians for over a century. "Peace," Martinez said simply. "For 3 years, we've been at war. We've lost ships, colonies, and thousands of lives. We don't want to rule over other species. We just want to live in peace and explore the galaxy." High Admiral Kethmore looked up from his seat. "Admiral Martinez, may I ask you something?" "Of course. Did you always intend to offer mercy to the hegemony? Even after everything we did to your people?" It was a question that went to the heart of human nature. The Zephyrians had attacked human colonies, captured civilians for experimentation, and planned genocide against the entire species. Many humans wanted revenge. "High Admiral," Martinez said thoughtfully, "we had a choice to make. We could either become the kind of species that commits genocide in response to attempted genocide, or we could try to build something better." She gestured to the assembled delegates. "Look around this table. Every species here has been hurt by the hegemony. The Valkyrie lost their homeworld. The Thaxians were used as test subjects. The Carillions were enslaved for generations. And, yet, they're all here, willing to work together to build a better future. But, why?" Kethmore asked. "Why show mercy to those who showed you none?" Chen spoke up from her position. "Because someone has to break the cycle. Every species in this sector has been at war with someone else at some point. The Zephyrians conquered the Valkyrie, who had previously conquered the Malatians, who had enslaved the Thaxians. If we just continue the pattern of revenge and conquest, the cycle never ends." Admiral Martinez nodded. "We decided to try something different. Instead of replacing the hegemony with another empire, we're creating a voluntary alliance based on mutual benefit and protection." The Vizian ambassador spoke up. "But, what happens when the next aggressive species appears? What happens when someone decides to test human resolve?" It was a good question. The Federation's military had proven capable of defeating the Zephyrian hegemony, but that didn't mean they were invincible. "We keep learning," Martinez said firmly. "We study every potential threat, we prepare for every possible conflict, and we make sure that anyone who wants to hurt innocent people understands the consequences." "And if that fails?" asked the Carillion delegate. Admiral Martinez's expression hardened slightly. "Then, we remind them why it's a bad idea to attack humans or their allies." The room fell silent as the implications of that statement sank in. The Federation had demonstrated at Wolf 359 and Arcturus that they were capable of devastating military action when necessary. But, they were also offering partnership and protection to former enemies. High Admiral Kethmore looked around the table at the various species representatives. "Admiral Martinez, I have a request to make." What is it? I would like to formally request that the Zephyrian hegemony be allowed to join this mutual defense alliance. The request surprised everyone in the room. The other delegates looked at each other uncertainly, while Admiral Martinez considered the implications. High Admiral, she said finally, the Zephyrian people are welcome to apply for membership in the Mutual Defense Alliance. But, there will be conditions. Name them. Complete disarmament of all bioweapon research facilities. Open borders for inspection teams. And trials for any hegemony personnel who committed war crimes against civilian populations. Kethmore nodded slowly. I accept those conditions on behalf of the Hegemony Council. The Valkyrie representative chimed with surprise. High Admiral, why would you agree to such terms? Because, Kethmore said quietly, I've spent the past 6 months studying human military doctrine and strategy. I've learned things about warfare that the hegemony never understood. Such as, asked the Cien ambassador. That the strongest military force isn't necessarily the one with the best weapons or the largest fleet. It's the one that can convince others to fight alongside them instead of against them. Admiral Martinez smiled slightly. High Admiral, I think you're beginning to understand how humans approach conflict. Yes, Kethmore said with something that might have been admiration. You don't just defeat your enemies. You turn them into allies. The meeting continued for several more hours as the delegates worked out the details of the new alliance structure. By the end, they had established the framework for a mutual defense agreement that would protect dozens of species across the sector. As the various delegates prepared to return to their ships, High Admiral Kethmore approached Admiral Martinez privately. Admiral, may I ask you one more question? Of course. When you first discovered our plans for bioweapons against Earth, why didn't you simply destroy the hegemony entirely? You had the capability. Martinez was quiet for a moment. High Admiral, humanity learned something important during our early history. When you destroy your enemies completely, you don't create peace. You just create more enemies. I don't understand. If we had wiped out the Zephyrian species, every other race in the galaxy would have seen us as a threat to be eliminated. We would have won one war only to guarantee many more. She gestured toward the viewports, where ships from a dozen different species could be seen docked at the Federation station. This way, we've gained allies instead of creating enemies. The hegemony's former subjects see us as liberators, not conquerors. And, even the Zephyrians themselves can become partners instead of perpetual enemies. Kethmore was quiet for a long moment. Admiral Martinez, I owe you an apology. For what? For underestimating your species so completely. We thought humans were primitive because your technology was less advanced than ours. We didn't realize that wisdom and strategy could be more powerful than bioengineering and superior weapons. Admiral Martinez extended her hand in the human gesture of respect. High Admiral, humanity didn't defeat the Zephyrian hegemony. We offered them something better than endless warfare. Kethmore looked at the offered hand for a moment, then reached out with his own chitinous appendage to complete the gesture. Admiral, I hope the alliance between our species will be long and prosperous. So do I, High Admiral. So do I. As the former Zephyrian commander left to return to his ship, Admiral Martinez looked out at the stars and reflected on the events of the past year. It had begun with the rescue of a single human intelligence officer and escalated into the largest military operation in Federation history. But, more importantly, it had ended with something humanity had rarely achieved in their turbulent history, the transformation of enemies into allies and the creation of lasting peace through strength and mercy. Lieutenant Commander Chen approached from across the conference room. Admiral, the Federation Council is asking for a preliminary report on the alliance negotiations. Tell them the negotiations were successful, Martinez replied. And tell them that humanity has just taken the first step toward becoming the kind of species we always hoped we could be. As the TFS Indomitable prepared to return to Earth with news of the new alliance, Admiral Martinez thought about the lesson that humanity had taught the galaxy. Sometimes the greatest victory wasn't defeating your enemies, it was showing them a better way to live. The war with the Zephyrian hegemony was over. But, the real work of building a peaceful and prosperous future was just beginning.